Lord be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see. His neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is," but others said, "No, it just looks like him." He said, "I am." So they said to him, "How were your eyes opened?" He replied, "The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went there and washed and was able to see." And they said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes and washed, and now I can see." So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." Now the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and gained his sight until they summoned the parents of the one who had gained his sight. They asked him, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How does he now see?" His parents answered and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. We do not know how he sees now, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He can speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone acknowledged Jesus as the Christ, he would be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents said, "He is of age, question him." So a second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner." He replied, "If he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see." So they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I told you already and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They ridiculed him and said, "You are that man's disciples. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from." The man answered and said to them, "This is what is so amazing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and you are trying to teach us?" Then they threw him out bodily. When Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, he found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord," and he worshipped him. Then Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, Surely we are not also blind, are we? Jesus said to them, If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, We see, and your sin remains. The Gospel of the Lord. Well, good morning, everyone. Some of you may know that every week, usually on Wednesday morning, I do a Mass for our parish school students. It's at 8:30 as a general rule, and if you ever want to come, you're welcome. It's a delightful experience. The kids take ownership of the liturgy. They do the readings. They do all sorts of things. And it really is a very upbeat experience. It's one of the highlights of my week. Well, this past week, a rather eye-opening experience occurred involving one of our students and our second grade teacher, Mrs. Muth. Now, some of you may know Mrs. Muth. She's been around here for a while, and her father, Jim Leach, is the man who built this church and the parish school. And normally, Mrs. Muth sits about right here where you all are. And so what happened, our children are encouraged to bring some sort of a gift for the collection. The children literally come out of their pews and bring their gifts to the front, and they have an option. They can either bring a non-perishable food item, a canned good, or they can bring money, or they can write a promissory note saying that they're going to do something good for somebody in the coming week. And so there was Miss Muth watching her little brood, and in front of her was the female equivalent to Spanky in our gang, several girls who are real close friends. And at one point in time, probably during the gospel, they were standing up, and Mrs. Muth looked over into the pew and saw that they were sitting over there, right where they were sitting, are these fake gold play money coins. Now, Mrs. Muth was not amused at all at the moment, and she saw this as a very irreverent plot here going on. And so she said something to the girls about, you can't put that in there. That's play money. The money's supposed to go for the poor, and, you shouldn't be doing stuff like that, and encouraged them to write a promissory note that they're going to do something good. Well, then the mother of one of the girls caught wind of this. And believe it or not, usually you go like that, wondering how they're going to react. But it was actually, the mother was very insistent. She wants her daughter to behave properly, especially when she's in church. And so she talked a little bit with Mrs. Muth, and then I talked with the mother, and she said that she was really, really concerned her daughter would behave in such an irreverent way. And I just told her, I said, well, don't sell her short just yet. And she said, well, I'm going to talk to her when she comes home from school and I get in from work this evening. And so they had their big powwow. And what she found out was absolutely adorable. The little girl, on the way to school that morning, got a lecture from the parent saying, you all have too many toys laying around. Why don't you take some of your toys and give them to the poor children? You've got too much. And so this little girl and her comrades in arms decided to take this play money, which to them was a toy, and they were going to give it to the poor children. It was a pure, precious gesture on their part. Now, I haven't talked to the mother since then, and I am going to talk to her today at some point, and when I'm going to tell her that in addition to having her eyes open to just how pure of heart her little girl is, I think it's a prophetic gesture as well. Now, what I mean by prophetic gesture, in the Old Testament, the prophets sometimes did sort of bizarre things in order to make a point for God. And I think this is a prophetic gesture because by the time that little second grader gets in high school, and the way the Fed is printing paper money, I think those little play coins will be worth more than the dollar during those days. So I think this girl is just let us know about the state of the economy and the $1 trillion in debts. But let's get back on track. Today's gospel is a very powerful and beautiful story, and it's meant for you all, the members of the RCIA. First of all, the lead-off point, and we've talked about this before. There was a man born blind brought to Jesus, and the people who bring him to Jesus ask the question, did this man sin, which was the reason he was born blind, or did one of his parents or grandparents or ancestors sin, and he's simply paying the price? Remember, in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the points of the book of Deuteronomy is, if you do something sinful, God's going to get you. And if he doesn't get you, he'll get somebody else down the food chain in your family line. But also, and this may sound bizarre to you, but remember this was the day before ultrasounds. Some of the rabbis, not all, taught that when something happened, when a child was stillborn or born with a horrible birth defect, such as blindness, maybe the baby in the mother's womb committed a sin. You see, a baby could sin in his or her mother's womb, was the thinking. Well, Jesus is buying any of it. He says to them right straight out, and you need to tell our fundamentalist friends all around us, our God is not a vindictive God. Humans may be vindictive, but our God is not. He takes no pleasure in seeing babies born blind or anything else. No. That's not how God operates, says Jesus. So get that out of your minds. Then comes the true artistry of John's authorship. We see a man who was born blind, and all of a sudden, watch what happens to the man. Remember, in the New Testament especially, blindness is a metaphor for no faith. Sight is a metaphor for faith. The words are used interchangeably in John's gospel. And so all of a sudden this man gets healed. Some people from the neighborhood look around and they say, wait a minute, isn't that the guy that used to be begging on the street that was born blind? Some say, oh yeah, that's him. Some say, nah, it just looks like him. It's really not him at all. So finally, after their gossiping match, they go and they approach the man and they say, are you the one? And the man says, yep, I'm the one. I was blind, but now I can see. And then they ask the pertinent question, who did this? And listen to his response. That man Jesus did it. That man Jesus. Well, at least he knows the name of that man, Jesus. But that's about it. But his eyes have been opened in faith. Then the Pharisees, the legal experts, step in. They're befuddled because they hear this man was born blind, but they also know that this reported miracle happened on the Sabbath when work was not permitted. Even attempt to heal someone was not permitted. And so they're thinking that whoever was involved with this is some kind of law-breaking sinner. And so they approach the man and they say, are you the one? Were you really and truly born blind? The man says, yeah, I really was. I was born blind. Well, how is it you can see, they ask. And the man says, I don't know, but I can tell you this much. You think he's a sinner, this guy Jesus? I tell you right now, he's a prophet. He's a prophet. Whoops. Their faith has just increased again. He not only recognizes the Lord as that man Jesus, but he also sees him as a holy man, a prophet. Well, they go to the parents because they're not satisfied with the answer. They think there's some kind of something going on that just doesn't smell right. And they go to the parents and they say, is this your son? They say, yes, he is our son. We know he's our son. Was he born blind? Absolutely, they say. We know that. Well, then who did this? Who opened his eyes? They're scared of these Pharisees because the word has already been put out. If you acknowledge Jesus as the Christ, out you go from the synagogue. You're no longer welcome to worship with all the other people. And so they pass off their response. They say, you know, he's old enough, you go ask him, he'll tell you. And so they go back, this time with very malicious intent. Now some other legalistic-minded Pharisees have joined the crowd, and all they can focus on is that this guy who opened this blind man's eyes did it on the Sabbath. It was work. It broke the law. What an illogical position to hold, huh? It doesn't matter what day of the week. If you can open somebody's eyes who was born blind, you would think they would have been grateful. But in their legalistic, hard-hearted, stubborn-headed mentality, they can't get past the fact that they need to celebrate that one of their brothers can see. And so now they approach the man again. And they tell him that this guy who did this to you, if he did it, is a sinner. And the guy simply looks at them and says, you guys make me want to laugh. Why do you keep asking about this guy Jesus? Are you wanting to believe in him too? He must be from God in order to be able to do this. Well, they throw him out of the synagogue area bodily. But look what happened. The guy now acknowledges Jesus as from God. Well, then finally, Jesus will interrogate this man. He looks at the man who's walking around the pool of Siloam and he simply says, do you know who the Son of Man is? Do you know who did this for you? And the man simply says, sir, I don't know who it is, but if you'll just point me to him, I will worship him. And then that's when Jesus reveals himself completely. He says to the man, I'm the one who did this for you. And look what the man does. Something that the apostles have not done yet. He falls on his knees in worship and calls Jesus the Lord. Look what has happened. First, he acknowledges Jesus as that man who did this for me. And then he calls him a prophet. And then he says under interrogation, he has to be from God. And now he confesses Jesus to be the Lord. Or in other words, what has happened to this man is that he has grown in faith in stages. It has taken time. But look what has happened to the hard-hearted, hard-headed, stubborn Pharisees. All they could think of was the law, the law, the law. And actually, what has happened, they have become totally blind. The one who opened the eyes of the blind man is right in front of them. And because of their hard-heartedness, their envy, their jealousy, their legalism, their eyes cannot recognize who the Lord is. What's the point for us? First of all, please, please, please tell your fundamentalist friends and all around us, our God does not afflict people like this. This man was born blind for a mysterious reason. But in Jesus' eyes, it was so that the power of God could be revealed to the world. But secondly, faith happens in stages. There are two very meaty books, very masterfully written books, if you ever want to get into some thick reading about faith. One was written in the 19th century, one was written in the 20th century. And there are no books out there now, no current research that supersedes what these two men did in their research on faith. One is William James, who is a psychologist and philosopher who wrote a book entitled The Varieties of Religious Experience. It used to be required reading for any liberal arts college. The second book is entitled The Stages of Faith Development, written by a man by the name of James Fowler, who is an ordained Methodist minister and a social psychologist. What both men say in their own way and based on solid research is that we tend to grow in faith the older that we get. Our faith develops over time chronologically. Now, the normal thing for all of us is we move, and I'm being very simplistic here, but we move from being narcissistic, private faith people to becoming, in time, people whose faith is other-oriented. We are for other people, to help other people. We see faith as something that must be given away for the good of others. Now, what's interesting, not everybody follows the pigeonhole process. Sometimes people are unique. That little girl, that second grade student of Mrs. Muse, was a classic example of it. She was going to take something that was of value to her, this play money, and give it to the poor. But there's also one of our people in the RCIA. He's not here today, but he happens to be an engineer. He's in his 20s, making a very good living for a 20-something-year-old, I can assure you. But one of the things I did with you all a few weeks ago, and you probably remember this, I asked you what your greatest fear was in this life. You remember what Jeremy said? Jeremy said his biggest fear was leaving this life and not having done everything he could do for other people. I was flabbergasted. For a 20-year-old who has a ton of money and who has the potential to make a ton of money as an engineer for the rest of his life, his number one fear is that he will leave this world without having done enough to help others. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. But that's the kind of people these RCIA people are this year. Wonderfully mature and deep in their faith people. But my point is, our faith normally grows over time. We grow, and so it's a process. And I say that for those who struggle at times with what they call desert experiences. You know, there are times when we have tragedies happen in our life. There are times when our faith gets really called into question. We find ourselves in a ditch, or as some people say, in the desert. I don't feel God talking to me. That happens in times. But sometimes that can serve as a catalyst to strengthen our faith and prepare us towards the future, if we allow it. And how does that happen? Well, if you work at your faith. Faith must be worked at constantly. But unfortunately, very often we fall into a problem, and that is complacency. You know, people will say to me, oh, I went to CCD when I was in grade school. I got all the Catholic stuff I need. I went to Catholic school all the way through high school. I got all that Catholic stuff, all that I need. And so they settle for ashes on Ash Wednesday, palms on Palm Sunday, and they are essentially C&E Catholics. Remember what that means, RCIA people? Christmas and Easter Catholics. You know, stick me in a pew somewhere up front on Christmas and Easter so the world can see that I'm a Catholic. But the bottom line, I've grown complacent in my faith. In Matthew chapter 13, verse 12, Jesus warns against complacency when he says to his disciples, those who have will be given more, but those who have not risk losing even the little that they have. Or in other words, faith is a use it or lose it proposition. If you're not working at your faith all of the time, then when those brick walls happen in the road and you encounter those brick walls, you stand to be stripped of the faith that you thought you had. The second problem, hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. And we heard about that in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1, that beautiful reading, that powerful reading that we hear every Ash Wednesday. Jesus says, beware of performing public religious gestures for the world to see. Beware, Jesus says. Why? Because these so-called people of faith called Pharisees were walking around in their fancy robes, uttering scriptures in public, doing all kinds of pious gestures for the whole world to see them. But nothing was happening here. You know, very often, people will want the world to know, hey, I'm a Catholic. Look at me, I got the ashes on my forehead. But no fruit is being produced for the kingdom of God. If you're truly a person of faith, if you have true, real faith, then that faith always comes out in good fruit. Not to show other people to make oneself look good, but because that's the natural progression of things. The Lord wants us to share with others. But for those who are hypocritical, all they can think about is me, myself, and I. Look at me, look how holy and pious I am. I went to church, not very often, but I go to church. The Lord would say to them, is that it? How's your gossip level? How's your kindness and compassion level? Are you showing anything with that big C over your head? Brothers and sisters of the RCIA, faith is a gift from God. That's one side of the coin. But the other side, it takes work. And you have been working quite hard at your faith since you stepped foot into this parish hall back in September. But that's not it. When you get dunked or put oil on your head this coming Easter, that can never be the end of your faith experience. You have to continue working to the end.